Hello and welcome to another episode of God-Sized Stories. I'm very blessed. I have Joel today. Joel, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, hey Craig, good morning. Yes, my name is Joel. I was born in the Rockton, Illinois area, so just outside Rockford. Grew up there, was homeschooled for most of my life and then got kicked out of homeschool, but we don't have time for that story today. Um, went went to Calvin University, at the time it was Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Started as a music major. Halfway through, I switched to communication major with a youth ministry minor. After that, worked in churches in about in some capacity for like 5.5 years. Um, and then in 2020, I really felt God calling me to transition into a different line of work. So now I'm in social work. I work in a program with kids who are on probation as a mentor to the kids. So a lot of getting them back out into the community and engaging positively there, working on social skills and coping skills, things along those lines. Um, on the personal side, just got married in July to my lovely wife, Lydia. Um, and we have our small little apartment in Grand Rapids, 2 buildings down from the best tacos in the entire city. Um, yeah, so yes, and now I'm just get to go to church as a normie. I serve on the worship team a lot. Some prankster at my church nominated me to be on council, so I'm currently halfway through a term of that.
All
So yeah, that's where my life is now.
Yeah, that's the short version of your life in a nutshell, eh?
Yep, sure is.
Now, I'm really blessed. This is a fun moment in recording for me. For a little background for you, audience. I met Joel a long time ago. Back in the time when he was talking, he was homeschooled. I started to come to youth group for the first time and eventually came to know the Lord and was really blessed. And Joel was one of those people in my life that I saw at youth group and stuff, and you can see it on him now. He's got this smile. He's just got this joy, and especially in a time in my life when that's what I was searching for. It was a blessing to meet you then, Joel, and it's a blessing now because we haven't talked in a while, and
Yeah.
we reconnected last week, and it was such a blessing. We spent a long time talking. I was like, it's like we could have spent another few hours, I think, and it was so great and so fun to just how the Lord connects us to people, and no matter what, we're always going to be connected. And it was funny when you said you were homeschooled because I had totally forgotten even that you were homeschooled. And
That's
I
so weird because most people, the first time they interact with me and I mention it, they're like, "Oh, that's what it was. Another piece in the puzzle."
see, but that's the thing though, is like longtime listeners of the show will know you are by nowhere near the first person that was homeschooled that has been on this show. There's
Yeah,
been many. It maybe someday will take the majority over. I'm not sure.
probably. Yeah.
uh, but anyways, to get back to our topic on hand today, you referenced in the short version of your story that you worked in church for a while and now you've transitioned into working in a more secular world, especially in the world of social work. What was that transition like?
Yeah. So there was a lot of that transition that was, I guess the short version is it was really beneficial
Hmm.
and really needed, but it was also really difficult. Um, 'Cause like I said, like that was a long time to work in churches. Started as a youth pastor, which again is one of those things that some people guess the second they see or hear me. And and I guess I'd put a lot of stake in that being, my job and my career and my calling. Um, so it was a big upheaval, it was a big change. And but I also knew that it was something that I needed to do because there were a lot of good things that I'd experienced from working in churches, but there were also a lot of exhausting things. And I knew that if I didn't take a step back, something was going to break. And um, it was, I needed to take care of myself because I knew that if I didn't take care of myself, I'm not going to be able to serve God in any capacity. Like, not even just like a church site, but like, how am I going to follow God in my relationships? How am I going to follow God in my time outside of work? How am I going to follow God in wherever He calls me next? And so I knew that, if I didn't take care of this, like things weren't going to get better, they were going to get worse. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was really difficult, but it was really needed. And now, um, about like I think yeah, about like 2 years into that transition away from church work, like it is something that I'm really grateful because I do firmly believe that it was the Holy Spirit calling me to a different space, and leading me leading me somewhere, where I'm still able to use the gifts that I've been given and being able to serve God, even if I'm not necessarily talking about Jesus every second.
hmm And I think it's really important to recognize we as like I'll say like the capital C church
Mm-hmm.
in America, especially, there's a lot of hurt that can happen and can experience. And honestly, especially as someone else who's spent a season working in and for a church, the people working there, it tends to happen a lot, and burnout tends to happen a lot. And I've had great conversations with many people through the podcast or not in the past that have similar stories of like how they've just been hurt. And I feel like, for one, it's a challenge to all of us, whether I love the term normies or not. Like right now, I'm in that season two, and I love it's so nice to just show up on Sunday and
Mm-hmm.
be poured on and loved and be able to worship differently because you're just part of the congregation. But it's a good challenge for us to remind ourselves we need to be praying for our leaders, for our,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're pastors or whether they're just working in a desk in the office, like,
Mm-hmm.
because Satan wants to tear us down.
Right.
He
Mm-hmm.
wants to hurt us. He wants to divide us. And church hurt is a really easy way to do that. So we need to be praying for these people. We need to, for protection from it, but then ultimately, like, healing, because I'm going to ask you in a second, like, this other question, but it's like, it's not an easy thing always to navigate. We have broken human minds. So what were some of the things that you did to help navigate after that season? Because like that's a transition, that's a hard transition, and you need a lot of support. What were some things that
Mm-hmm.
you did?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. And I'll preface this by saying a lot of this, like my answers are not prescriptive answers. Like this is truly just like descriptive answers. This is what
Mhm.
like worked best for me. Um, so one thing I did was I have a few books that I pretty regularly read whenever I'm doing some sort of, I like to use the term church reset because that's almost what it's been like when I moved out to Colorado, and then when I moved back to Grand Rapids, and then when I left my church in Grand Rapids. um, I had a couple books on my shelf that I like to read in these situations. One of them is Searching for Sunday by Rachel Held Evans, which is a memoir where she writes about her experience in mainstream evangelical culture, growing up in it, participating in a church plant, and facing some of the disillusionment and disenchantment with the capital C church, and then getting to the space that she was in before she passed away, a couple of years ago, where she's involved in her church and she's like, yeah, I love God and like I love the church and this is the space for me to be. Um, I also pretty regularly reread Surprised by Hope by N.T. Wright, which was a big, like in general, it was a game changer for me in the way I view what the death and resurrection of Jesus mean, how that shapes how we live today, and how it's not necessarily like, oh, we're just waiting to get into heaven when we die. It's like we know we get to participate in the new heaven and the new earth right now through what we're doing in our everyday life. I also am a huge fan of Henry Nouwen. Um, Pretty regularly try to reread both his book, The Return of the Prodigal Son, which is a reflection on the prodigal son story and especially what he saw when he first saw Rembrandt's rendition of the scene. Beautiful book. He also has another one, The Inner Voice of Love, which is literally journal entries that he was writing to himself when he
Huh.
was going through a really difficult spiritual time. And yeah, so those things, along with like obviously spending time in the Bible, were have been huge strengtheners to me. It's also something where I allow myself that period of mourning and allowing myself to feel upset about the loss that I'm experiencing in this moment, because no matter the context I left a church position in, it's really difficult. There's a lot of change. Like there are some folks who I like haven't talked to in a while because it's just, I mean, partially distance, but also just because like it's a strain on relationships. And thankfully, like there's still a good with like Lydia and I are heading to Colorado this summer for one of my friends from that church's wedding, and we've already like coordinated who we're gonna see with who we're gonna see and who we're gonna be spending time with. And um yeah, but so like just allowing myself to feel that way and to recognize like, yeah, this there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of difficulty, and there's a lot of grief. And then also recognizing that it's just a piece of the story. It's not the whole story. And even if I can't see the rest of the story yet, um, I truly believe from the bottom of my heart that God wastes nothing, and that everything is used for everything is used for good, everything is redeemed for good. I'm also really cautious about like saying that, like
Right.
in the
Right.
moment, like I've had some well-meaning folks tell me like in the most difficult moment of like this transition, like God has a plan, and it takes every fiber of my being to stop myself from saying like, well, God must have a really dumb plan. Like like it's truly something that, you know, give it like a year, give it 5 years, whatever amount of
Yeah.
time you need. And then and now I'm able to look back and I'm like, okay, yeah, like being being asked to leave my church position in Colorado was really difficult. But if I'd if it had happened like a year later, I'd probably be job searching right at the start of the pandemic. I also did meet Lydia for the first time shortly after I moved back to Grand Rapids, because I moved back in August of 2019.
Hmm.
Met in at like the beginning of September, and then the next month we had our first date. And obviously things are going very well. So.
Oh, amen.
Mhm.
Uh, so I want to end then with a set of questions more in the joyous sense of now. So in your short version of your story, you shared about like now you work with social work, you work with kids. I want to give you a little time to flesh that out a little bit more about what you do, what does it look like, and you said you get some opportunities, sprinkle in a little bit of your faith here and there, and
Right.
it might even be just from a day to day of what you do.
Mhm.
Let the audience know about that.
Yeah. So my primary role at my job is I work in a program with kids on probation. Typically boys between the ages of 8 and 12. And I serve as a mentor in the position. We have a therapist who meets with the kids and potentially their parents or their guardians as well for like traditional formal in-home therapy. And my role is essentially to be the fun guy. So we spend a lot of time at the library because it's one of the last places in the world you can hang out for free. And also one of my soft goals is to get every kid I work with signed up for a library card if they don't already have one. But we also go to like the park and play basketball. If the weather's nice, we'll go to the YMCA. We'll go to museums. We'll do sometimes we do like a special trip to like a place called Craig's Cruisers, which is essentially like indoor outdoor go karts and like art and arcade, and like they've got like a trampoline park and everything. It's great. The kids love it. Um, so that's very much like a special occasion thing. But we also have like some writing prompts that we work on together, to get them to encourage them to practice empathy and putting themselves into their victim's shoes. And sort of culminates in writing an apology letter to the person they wronged and coming up with a plan to avoid getting back in the same situation again. Um, so like I'll also like show up to court hearings and share how the kids are doing. I'll um yeah, just like be a positive person in their life. And like I truly believe that one of the most important things I can do for these kids is just to show up and to be a person in their lives who's like, yeah, like I know that you've made some mistakes, but you are still a person who's, worthy of love. Like you're made in God's image, and because of that, I'm going to do my darndest to care for you and to show you grace the way I've been shown grace.
Amen.
Oh no, shoot. Sorry, I got to call. Someone was trying to call me, but I thought I had do not disturb. Shoot, my bad.
No
Um,
worries.
yeah. But yeah, so like being like showing that grace that I've been shown.
Yeah.
And um like now I'm remembering, I had an interaction with my former supervisor, a really positive interaction. Um, I'd made a goof on the job. I made a mistake. I had a lapse in judgment, and it wasn't a major deal, but it was something that I shouldn't have done. And my supervisor asked if we could check in over Microsoft Teams, and she did a great job, quelled my anxiety immediately. She said, "So just to clarify, this isn't punitive. Like you're not in trouble, but we do need to talk through this, and we need to talk about like what can happen in the future." Um, and I and it was a really good conversation.
Hmm.
Um, and at the end, I thanked her because I said, like, I've had, there have been like some really difficult conversations at past jobs, and um, and this was not one of them. So I came in with a lot of anxiety, but this was really beneficial for me. So thank you. And she said, as a Christian, like I believe that I've been shown a lot of grace, and I want to make sure I'm showing that grace to others. And I was trying to think about it later, and in in my church positions, like I'm not saying it didn't happen, like I don't want to say that, but it was really hard for me to think of a time I've heard a similar sentiment from folks at church when I've been struggling. Um,
Sure.
yeah, and so I was really grateful for that conversation, and like even in my day-to-day work, like with the kids, I think a lot about the parable of the sheep and the goats in the Gospel of Matthew, when Jesus is talking to the sheep and he says, I was hungry, I was thirsty, you gave me something to eat and drink. I didn't have any clothes and you gave me clothes. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you visited me. And they say, well, that's weird, Jesus, because we literally don't remember any of this. and Jesus says, whenever you did this to the least of these, you did this for me. And it's so weird because lots of times I'm doing very similar things. I try to have snacks for the kids like if I'm picking them up from school, because then they're going like a while without food. So like I'll have Cheez-Its or granola bars like in a little baggie, like a bottle of water or Gatorade, whatever their favorite color is. And if I have a kid who's in detention, I'm on the professional visitors list, so I'm able to go visit with them and like play some Uno and hang out, but also like continue to talk about what we need to talk about. Um, yeah, so it is, and like it's one of those things where I typically don't like proselytize, so like I'm not like, like there's no altar call in my position, but
Okay.
but it is one of those things where if a kid asks me, like I've had kids ask me, like, "Are you a Christian?" And I'll say, "Yeah, I am." Um, and like I'll talk about like I'll casually mention like, "Oh yeah, like I'm on the music team at church this week," um, or like share stories like that. But like what my third favorite quote from Martin Luther is something along the lines of, the Christian shoemaker doesn't do his job well by putting crosses on all of his shoes. The Christian shoemaker does his job well by making good shoes. And, you know, I firmly believe that what I'm doing in my work is witness. And, you know, I love talking about Jesus and, you know, don't want to ever stop doing that. But I also recognize like that there's, I'm not interested in like accidentally manipulating someone into the arms of Christ.
Yes, I've heard that. I've heard similar terminology to that before too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Joel, thank you so much for all you do. Like your heart is so awesome, and thank you for just the love for people, and especially in this season for kids. It's like it's such a blessing because I've spent so much time in education too. Like the kids are our future. It's true.
Yeah. And they're
uh,
also our right now.
that is also very true.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. They're our future and they're also our right now. And
Yeah. Thank you for all of that. Thank you for spending this time with me and the audience because it's just a blessing to reconnect with people. And I want to say this is a challenge to the listeners at home. Uh, Reach out to some of your old contacts, and I don't mean just if you're a believer, to other believers, like people that you haven't talked to in a while. Check in just to see how they're doing. No big surprise to anyone. It's been a crazy last half decade. Uh, and just check in on some of those people, see how they're doing, reconnect. If you're local still, grab a cup of coffee. If not, the internet's really easy. It's a great way to
Mhm.
reconnect with people because Joel and I are by no means close, but we can be close through a simple computer program. So do that this week. When you have some free time, just reach out, even send a little message, send a little text. It's real simple to get reconnected with people. Uh, that little act of kindness might mean more than you would ever know. They might really need that right now. So think about that this week. And audience, as always, thank you so much for listening. I couldn't do this without you. Goodbye.